The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Margaret Sullivan's home office in suburban Connecticut. At 62, she sat behind her mahogany desk, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, reviewing the quarterly reports from her chain of boutique hotels. The gentle hum of the air conditioning provided a stark contrast to the storm brewing in her chest. "Mom, you need to sign these papers." Emma's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Margaret looked up to see her 35-year-old daughter standing in the doorway, designer heels clicking against the hardwood floor as she approached. Emma's perfectly manicured nails drummed impatiently on the folder she carried. "What papers?" Margaret asked, though something in her daughter's demeanor already told her she wouldn't like the answer. Emma dropped the folder on the desk with unnecessary force. "The power of attorney documents. Dad's condition is getting worse, and someone needs to make decisions about his care. Obviously, that someone should be me." Margaret's jaw tightened. Richard's Alzheimer's diagnosis 6 months ago had been devastating, but they had been managing. She visited him every day at the memory care facility, ensuring he received the best possible treatment. "Your father and I have already made arrangements. Arrangements that don't make sense anymore," Emma interrupted, her voice rising. "You're overwhelmed, Mom. Between the business and Dad, you're barely keeping it together. I'm trying to help. By going behind my back to lawyers?" Margaret's eyes narrowed as she scanned the documents. "This would give you control over your father's medical decisions and his finances?" Emma's face flushed. "Someone responsible needs to handle things. You're too emotional about this. Every time the doctors suggest a new treatment protocol, you spend weeks agonizing over it. Dad doesn't have weeks to waste." "Emotional?" Margaret stood slowly, her hands pressed flat against the desk. "I've been married to your father for 38 years. I built this business while raising you and your brother. I think I'm capable of making decisions about my husband's care." "Are you?" Emma's voice turned cold. "Because from where I'm standing, you're the one who let him deteriorate at home for months before finally accepting he needed professional care. You're the one who insists on these pointless daily visits when he doesn't even recognize you half the time." The words hit Margaret like physical blows. She had agonized over the decision to move Richard to the facility, had cried herself to sleep for weeks afterward, but hearing her daughter weaponize that pain, "He recognizes me," Margaret said quietly. "Maybe not always, but there are moments. Tuesday, he called me by my nickname. He smiled when I played our wedding song." Emma rolled her eyes. "You're living in denial. This isn't about your feelings, Mom. It's about what's best for Dad. And frankly, what's best for the family assets. The hotel chain, the investments, the properties, they need to be protected." "Protected from what, exactly?" "From your sentimental decision-making. Do you know how much that memory care facility costs? There are more economical options that would provide adequate care." Margaret felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Adequate?" "Yes, adequate. We need to think long-term, about preserving the estate, about ensuring there's something left for the family." "You mean for you?" Emma's mask of concern finally slipped entirely. "I've worked for this family my entire life. I've put my own career on hold to help with the business. I deserve to have a say in how our resources are managed." "You've worked for this family?" Margaret's voice was dangerously quiet. "You mean the 3 months you spent at the hotel in Boston before quitting because customer service was beneath you? Or perhaps the year you spent as social media manager where you posted twice a month? I was building our brand presence. You were planning your wedding on company time. A wedding that cost more than most people's homes, if I recall correctly." Emma's face contorted with rage. "How dare you throw that in my face? You offered to pay for it." "Yes, I did. Just like I offered to pay for your MBA, which you dropped out of after 1 semester. Just like I paid for your apartment in Manhattan, your car, your—" "Stop it!" Emma's scream echoed through the room. "Just stop it! I don't need you to list every single thing you've ever done for me like you're some kind of martyr. You know what? I don't need you at all. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself, and I'm certainly more capable of handling Dad's situation than you are." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and irreversible. Margaret stared at her daughter, this stranger wearing her daughter's face, and felt something fundamental break inside her chest. "You don't need me," Margaret repeated softly. "No, I don't." Emma's chin lifted defiantly. "I haven't needed you for years. You just can't accept that your little girl grew up. You have to control everything. Have to be the great Margaret Sullivan who built an empire and saved everyone. Well, guess what? Some of us don't want to be saved. Some of us just want what we're owed." "What you're owed?" Margaret sat back down slowly, suddenly feeling every one of her 62 years. "And what exactly do you think you're owed, Emma?" "My inheritance. My fair share of what this family has built." "What this family has built?" Margaret's laugh was bitter. Your father and I built this business with our bare hands. We started with one small inn in Vermont, worked 18-hour days, missed vacations, postponed everything for years to grow it into what it is today. You've contributed nothing but expenses. That's not true, isn't it? Tell me, Emma, what have you ever built? What have you ever created? What have you ever done that wasn't funded by the money your father and I earned? Emma's face had turned an alarming shade of red. I'm your daughter. That should be enough. Being my daughter means I love you. It doesn't mean you're entitled to a lifetime of financial support while showing zero gratitude or respect. Respect? You want to talk about respect? You've never respected me. Never believed in me. Always comparing me to perfect David who went to medical school and never asks for anything. Well, maybe if you'd supported my dreams instead of constantly criticizing. Which dreams, Emma? The fashion line that never produced a single garment? The restaurant you wanted to open until you realized it would require actual work? The art gallery that existed only in Instagram posts? I would have supported any dream that came with a business plan and commitment. I don't need to listen to this. Emma snatched up the unsigned papers. When Dad's condition worsens, and it will, don't come crying to me. When you're drowning in medical bills and tough decisions, remember that you pushed away the one person trying to help. You're not trying to help. You're trying to take control of money that isn't yours. Yet, Emma spat. It isn't mine yet. But we both know how this ends, don't we? Dad's not getting better. And when he's gone, you'll be all alone with your precious hotels and your pride. Hope they keep you warm at night. Margaret stood again, this time with careful deliberation. She walked to her office safe, spun the combination, and pulled out a thick envelope. You want to know how this ends? I'll tell you exactly how this ends. Emma watched warily as her mother returned to the desk. This, Margaret held up the envelope, is a copy of my will. The original is with my attorney. You feature quite prominently in it. Or rather, you did. What's that supposed to mean? Margaret picked up her phone. Jonathan, it's Margaret Sullivan. I need to make some changes to my estate planning. Yes, immediately. Can you fit me in tomorrow morning? Perfect. She hung up and looked at her daughter. You don't need me? Fine. Then you don't need what I've built either. Emma's bravado cracked. Mom, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. You just screamed that you don't need me. I'm simply taking you at your word. That's not... I didn't mean... Yes, you did. And maybe you're right. Maybe it's time I stopped enabling you. Maybe if you had to stand on your own 2 feet, you develop some character. You're cutting me out of the will because of one argument? Emma's voice had gone shrill. No, Emma. I'm cutting you out of the will because at 35 years old, you've shown me exactly who you are. Someone who sees her father's illness as an opportunity for financial gain. Someone who views her mother's love as a bank account to be drained. Someone who contributes nothing but demands everything. You can't do this. I'll contest it. You'll what? Hire a lawyer with what money? Take me to court to demand an inheritance you haven't earned? Good luck with that. Emma's face crumbled. Mom, please, let's talk about this. I was upset. I didn't mean... You meant every word. And for the first time in years, you were finally honest. I should thank you for that. This is insane. Over one fight? One moment of anger? Margaret shook her head slowly. This isn't about one fight, Emma. This is about a pattern of behavior I've ignored for too long. This is about you showing up here not to ask about your father's health or offer genuine support, but to try to seize control of his finances. This is about 35 years of taking and never giving. I'm your daughter. Emma's scream was raw now, desperate. Yes, you are. And I'll always love you. But love doesn't mean I have to finance your lifestyle forever. Love doesn't mean I have to watch you circle like a vulture while your father fights a terrible disease. How dare you? How dare I? How dare you come into my home and demand power of attorney over a man who changed your diapers, who taught you to ride a bike, who walked you down the aisle at that obscenely expensive wedding? How dare you look at his illness and see dollar signs? Emma was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. I was trying to help. No, you weren't. And we both know it. Margaret's voice was tired now, drained. I think you should leave. Mom, leave, Emma, before we both say things that can't be taken back. You're already taking back everything. You're destroying our relationship over money. No, Margaret said quietly. You destroyed our relationship over money. I'm just finally acknowledging it. Emma stood there for a long moment, tears streaming down her face, mouth opening and closing like she was searching for the magic words that would fix this. But there were no magic words. There was only the truth, hanging between them like a blade. Finally, she turned and stormed out, her heels clicking furiously against the floor. Margaret heard the front door slam with enough force to rattle the windows. In the sudden silence, Margaret sank into her chair and put her head in her hands. The afternoon sun had shifted. casting her office in a golden glow that felt mockingly cheerful. On her desk, the quarterly reports still waited for her attention, but the numbers blurred before her eyes. She thought of Richard, sitting in his room at the memory care facility, probably watching the birds outside his window. He'd always loved birds. She thought of the young man who'd convinced her to take a chance on that first inn, who'd painted the walls with her until 3 a.m., who'd celebrated every small victory and weathered every setback by her side. She thought of Emma as a little girl, climbing into their bed during thunderstorms, proudly presenting macaroni art, laughing as Richard pushed her on the swings. When had that little girl disappeared? When had she been replaced by this entitled stranger? Margaret wiped her eyes and reached for her phone again. She scrolled through her contacts until she found her son's number. "Hi, Mom," David's warm voice answered on the second ring. "How's Dad today?" "He had a good morning, recognized his favorite nurse, ate most of his breakfast." She paused. "David, I need to tell you something. Emma was just here." "Oh no. What did she want this time?" So he'd noticed too. Somehow that made it both better and worse. Power of attorney. Over your father's medical decisions and finances. David's sharp intake of breath said everything. "Mom, you didn't—" "Of course not. But David, I'm making some changes. To the will." A pause. "Because of Emma?" "Because of a lot of things. I wanted you to hear it from me first." "Mom, you don't owe me any explanations. It's your money, your business. You built it." Margaret closed her eyes, grateful beyond words for this son who asked for nothing, who called to check on his father, who understood. "How did I raise two such different children?" "You didn't," David said gently. "You raised us the same. We just made different choices about who we wanted to be." After they hung up, Margaret sat in her office as the sun set, thinking about choices. About the choice to build something from nothing. The choice to love someone through sickness and health. The choice to stop enabling destructive behavior, even when it came wrapped in the face of someone you loved. Tomorrow she would meet with Jonathan and make it official. She would remove Emma from the will, set up trusts for any future grandchildren, ensure David understood he was being given responsibility, along with inheritance. She would continue visiting Richard every day, holding his hand, playing their song, treasuring whatever moments of recognition she could find. But tonight she grieved. Not for the money or the business or the fractured family dynamics. She grieved for the daughter she'd lost long before today, for the relationship that had been dying a slow death beneath the weight of entitlement and greed. Outside her window, the Connecticut evening settled in, peaceful and indifferent to the small tragedy that had played out in this room. Life would go on. The hotels would continue to run. Richard would have good days and bad days. David would call to check in. And Emma would either learn to stand on her own feet or she wouldn't. Margaret had finally accepted that it wasn't her job to catch her daughter every time she fell. Sometimes love meant letting go. Sometimes it meant saying no. Sometimes it meant acknowledging that the words screamed in anger. "I don't need you," might be the truest thing Emma had ever said. The irony, Margaret thought, as she finally turned her attention back to the quarterly reports, was that Emma was right. She didn't need her mother. What she needed was to discover who she could be without the safety net, without the constant financial cushion, without the enabling disguised as love. Whether Emma would rise to that challenge or crumble beneath it remained to be seen. But for the first time in 35 years, it wouldn't be Margaret's problem to solve. As the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7, Margaret made a decision. She would go to Richard tonight, not tomorrow. She would sit with him and hold his hand and tell him about their daughter, and maybe he would understand and maybe he wouldn't. But she would find comfort in his presence either way. Because unlike Emma, Margaret understood what it meant to need someone in ways that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with love. End of Chapter 1. Tentar novamente gokeditor. Chapter 2. The Aftermath. The morning light filtered through the gauze curtains of Emma's Manhattan apartment, highlighting the chaos within. Designer shopping bags lay scattered across the living room floor, their contents spilling onto the cream-colored carpet. Empty wine bottles lined the kitchen counter like soldiers after a lost battle. Emma sat on her Italian leather sofa, still wearing yesterday's clothes, staring at her phone with bloodshot eyes. 47 missed calls to her mother. 47 unanswered attempts at reconciliation. The last one had gone straight to voicemail at 3 a.m. Babe, you okay?" Marcus emerged from the bedroom, his hair tousled from sleep. Her husband of 3 years picked his way through the shopping bag minefield and settled beside her. "Did you sleep at all?" "She's really doing it," Emma whispered, showing him her phone. "Mom's attorney's office just opened. She'll be there by now, changing everything." Marcus ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture Emma had once found endearing, but now recognized as his tell when calculating options. "Maybe it's not too late. Maybe if you went there in person..." She won't see me. Emma's voice cracked. I know my mother. Once she makes a decision like this, she couldn't finish the sentence. The apartment fell silent except for the distant hum of Manhattan traffic 20 floors below. This apartment that her mother paid for. The furniture her mother had helped select. The life her mother had subsidized. We need to talk about practical matters, Marcus said carefully. The rent on this place is due next week. Emma turned to stare at him. That's what you're thinking about right now? The rent? Someone has to. Your credit cards? Are they? They're mine. My name. But her mother had been paying them off every month. The Black Amex, the Bergdorf account, the Saks card, all technically hers, all functionally dependent on monthly infusions from her mother's checking account. How much do we have in savings? Marcus asked. Emma laughed, a bitter sound that bordered on hysteria. Savings? What savings? Everything went to the wedding, remember? The honeymoon? She gestured at the shopping bags. I went shopping yesterday to clear my head before going to Mom's. $8,000 at Barney's because I needed confidence for that conversation. Marcus went very still. $8,000. In one day. I was upset. I knew it would be a difficult conversation. I needed to feel powerful. And do you? Feel powerful? Emma hurled her phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, the screen cracking. Does it look like I feel powerful? Marcus stood up, pacing to the window. The Manhattan skyline stretched before them, a kingdom of glass and steel that suddenly felt less like a playground and more like a prison. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. What? Is there any chance she'll change her mind? Emma thought about her mother's face yesterday. The disappointment. The finality. No. Then we need to make plans. Real plans. Not fairy tales about her coming around or you contesting the will. Actual, practical plans for how we're going to live. I could get a job. Doing what exactly? Marcus turned from the window, and Emma saw something in his face she'd never seen before. Fear. Your resume has a 3-month stint at your family's hotel and nothing else. You dropped out of your MBA program. You have no marketable skills. I have connections. I know people. You know people who tolerate you because of your mother's money and influence. How many of them will return your calls when word gets out that Margaret Sullivan has cut you off? The truth of it hit Emma like a physical blow. She thought of the charity committees she sat on, the social clubs, the restaurant reservations that materialized with a single phone call, all of it tied to her last name, to her mother's reputation and bank account. You're being cruel, she whispered. I'm being realistic. Something you should have been yesterday before you screamed at the woman who funds our entire life. Marcus moved to the bar and poured himself a scotch, despite the early hour. Do you have any idea what you've done? I was trying to protect our future. Dad's care is costing a fortune. The estate needs to be managed properly. Our future? Marcus laughed harshly. Be honest, Em, you were trying to protect your inheritance. You got greedy and you got caught. How can you say that to me? You've benefited from my family's money just as much as I have. The difference is, I never pretended otherwise. I never bit the hand that fed me. He took a long sip of his drink. I need to think about my options. Your options? Emma stood up, swaying slightly from exhaustion and the remnants of last night's wine. We're married, Marcus. We're in this together. Are we? Because from where I'm standing, you just torpedoed our entire life because you couldn't keep your mouth shut for one conversation. Get out. Excuse me? I said, get out. If you can't support me when I'm going through the worst day of my life, then leave. Marcus set down his glass with deliberate calm. This apartment is in your name, but your mother pays for it. The car downstairs is in your name, but your mother pays for it. Everything in this life is yours on paper and hers in reality. So tell me, Emma, who's really being asked to leave? Before she could respond, her phone buzzed from where it had fallen. Despite the cracked screen, she could see David's name. Her younger brother, the perfect son who never asked for anything, and therefore received love and respect she'd never been given. What do you want? She answered, not bothering to hide her bitterness. Emma, I just left Mom's attorney's office. Her heart stopped. And? She's done it. Changed everything. I tried to talk her out of it, but what? You didn't try very hard? Why would you? When you stand to inherit everything now. That's not fair and you know it. I told her to reconsider, to give you another chance. She showed me the power of attorney papers you brought. Jesus, Emma, what were you thinking? I was thinking about protecting our father's interests. You were thinking about protecting your own interests, and everyone knows it. You couldn't even pretend to care about Dad. The papers were all about financial control. Emma sank back onto the sofa. She can't just cut me out completely. I'm her daughter. There are laws. She's leaving you $50,000, David said quietly. She said it's enough for a fresh start if you use it wisely, but not enough to maintain your current lifestyle. Everything else, the hotels, the properties, the investments, it's all going into trusts. I'll oversee them, but I can't access the principal. It's structured to support Dad's care, maintain the business, and eventually benefit any grandchildren. Grandchildren I don't even have yet? She's hoping it will motivate you to build something real. Emma, a life, a family, something beyond shopping and parties. And if I don't have children, if I can't, then it goes to mine eventually, or to charity. The point is, it's protected from being liquidated for quick cash. Emma felt the room spin. $50,000. It sounded like a lot until you realized it was less than what she'd spent on her wedding dress. Less than 6 months of rent on this apartment. Less than a year of the lifestyle she'd always known. This is your fault, she hissed at David. You've always been her favorite. Always so perfect. Never needing anything. Making me look bad by comparison. I need plenty, Emma. I just don't confuse needing money with needing family. When's the last time you visited Dad without an ulterior motive? When's the last time you called Mom just to talk, not to ask for something? That's rich, coming from someone who's about to inherit an empire. I'm not inheriting an empire. I'm being given the responsibility of managing trusts designed to take care of our father and preserve what our parents built. It's not a windfall. It's a job. One I don't particularly want, but will do because someone has to. How noble of you. Emma, David's voice softened. It's not too late. You could apologize. Show her you understand what you did wrong. Get a job, any job. Show some initiative, some growth. She's not cutting you out of her life, just her will. There's a difference. She made me beg and then rejected me. I called 47 times. Did you apologize in any of those calls? Or did you just demand she reconsider? Emma's silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. Look, I have to go. I'm picking Mom up to visit Dad. But Emma, this doesn't have to be the end of our family. That's up to you. After he hung up, Emma sat in the ruins of her life, Marcus watching her with calculating eyes. $50,000. She did the math with the cruel clarity that comes from desperation. First and last month's rent on a cheaper apartment, moving costs, living expenses while she looked for a job she wasn't qualified for and wouldn't know how to find. The money might last a year if she was careful. But Emma had never been careful. I need to make some calls, Marcus said finally, heading to the bedroom. Figure out my next moves. Our next moves, Emma corrected, but he didn't respond. She reached for her laptop and opened her bank account. $1,500 in checking. The credit card statements she'd been ignoring for months flickered like threats on the screen. Without her mother's monthly payments, she was looking at minimum payments of nearly $8,000. The interest alone would destroy her. Her phone buzzed. A text from her best friend, Melissa. Heard about your mom? Drinks tonight? Soho House? The speed of the gossip shouldn't have surprised her. Margaret Sullivan was a prominent businesswoman. Her lawyer was probably discreet, but the staff at the hotels would know something was happening. Phone calls would be made. By evening, all of Manhattan's social circuit would know that Emma Sullivan Brennan had been cut off. She thought of the charity gala next week, the one where she'd bought a table for $10,000. Billed to her mother's account, of course. The Friends of the Metropolitan Museum luncheon where she sat on the committee. The sample sales and private shopping events that came from being Margaret Sullivan's daughter. All of it, about to evaporate. Another text, this time from her personal shopper at Bergdorf. Hi, Emma. The new Chanel collection just arrived. Should I set aside some pieces for you? Emma stared at the message until the words blurred. Yesterday, she would have said yes without thinking. Today, she couldn't afford a Chanel keychain. From the bedroom, she could hear Marcus on the phone, his voice low and urgent, making his moves, protecting himself. She wondered if he was calling his ex-girlfriend, the one from the good family who'd never gotten over him, the one who'd stood to inherit her grandfather's pharmaceutical fortune. I need help, Emma said to the empty room, testing the words. They felt foreign in her mouth, sharp-edged and uncomfortable. She'd never needed help before. She'd needed money, needed things, needed status, but never help. She picked up her cracked phone and scrolled through her contacts. Hundreds of names. Friends from private school and charity boards and exclusive clubs. People who'd attended her wedding and her parties and her brunches. How many of them would take her call if she was just Emma, not Emma Sullivan of the Sullivan Hotel fortune? She thought of yesterday, standing in her mother's office, screaming that she didn't need her. The words echoed now, mocking and hollow. She'd meant them in that moment, drunk on self-righteousness and greed, but she'd been thinking of need in the narrowest terms. Financial support, material comfort, the cushion of wealth that had always been there. She hadn't thought about the other ways she needed her mother, the advice she'd dismissed as old-fashioned, the values she'd ignored in favor of easier paths, the example of hard work and building something real that she'd never bothered to follow. Her phone rang. The area code was unfamiliar, but she answered anyway. Mrs. Sullivan Brennan, this is Patricia Walsh from American Express. I'm calling regarding your account. Emma's stomach dropped. Is there a problem? We've received notice that the authorized user who's been making payments on your account has requested to be removed. We need to discuss your plans for assuming the payment responsibility. Can I call you back? Of course. But please be aware that your next payment of $12,437 is due in 5 days. If we don't receive payment, we'll have to suspend charging privileges. Emma hung up and ran to the bathroom, barely making it before she was sick. $12,000, due in 5 days. And that was just one card. When she emerged, Marcus was standing in the living room with a suitcase. Where are you going? My brother's place. I need some time to think. You're leaving me? Now? He shrugged. You left us yesterday when you decided to attack your mother. I'm just making it official. We're married. We're broke. Emma. Or we will be soon. I didn't sign up for that. For better or worse, remember? For richer or poorer? Nice words for a wedding. But this is real life. He moved toward the door, then paused. You want some advice? Call your mother. Grovel. Beg. Do whatever it takes. Because in about a week, this apartment, these clothes, this life, it's all going to disappear. And you're not equipped to handle what comes next. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Emma alone in the apartment that wasn't really hers, surrounded by things she couldn't actually afford, living a life built on someone else's foundation. She walked to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere across town, her mother was sitting with her father, holding his hand, managing an empire while her heart broke over a husband who was slipping away and a daughter who'd revealed her true nature. David was probably there too. The son who understood that love wasn't measured in dollars. That family meant more than inheritance. That building something mattered more than spending something. Emma had always thought she was the smart one, playing the game, maximizing her advantages. But standing in her apartment as the walls closed in, she realized she'd been playing the wrong game entirely. While she'd been focused on taking, David had been learning. While she'd been spending, he'd been building relationships. While she'd been calculating her inheritance, he'd been earning trust. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Melissa. Also, is it true Marcus left? Sarah saw him with a suitcase getting into an Uber. The speed of gossip again. By nightfall, everyone would know. The credit cards would be canceled. The reservations would be harder to get. The invitations would slow, then stop. She'd become a cautionary tale whispered about at charity luncheons. The woman who had everything and threw it away for greed. Emma sank to the floor, her designer dress pooling around her. $50,000. It was a fortune to most people, a fresh start, a chance to build something. But she'd never built anything. She'd only ever spent. The morning light had shifted to afternoon, time passing in a blur of phone calls from credit card companies and texts from fair-weather friends. Each notification was another rope being cut, another support being withdrawn, another piece of her identity crumbling. She thought of her father, sitting in his memory care facility, his brilliant mind fading, but his heart still recognizing love when it walked through the door. She'd visited him exactly twice since his diagnosis, both times complaining about the smell, the sadness, the inconvenience. She'd seen his confusion as weakness, his vulnerability as something to be managed and monetized rather than simply witnessed with compassion. Her mother had been right. She'd shown exactly who she was. The question now was whether that was who she would remain.